taxpayers' money. This nonsense has got to stop, ladies and gentlemen. That's the only way we can have money for effective service delivery. Because government keeps crying and saying, well, there is no money. There is money. There is money, but it is put in the wrong places. We've got bloated administrative structures with duplicated agencies, wasteful expenses on RDCs and their multiple deputies. You have an RDC, deputy RDC, assistant RDC, and a plethora of structures therein. Poor budget performance with irregular supplementary allocations and persistent corruption, despite anti-graft measures, all undermining public trust and fiscal responsibility. These are some of the things we propose to deal with these issues. We've got to streamline the presidency's administrative functions to eliminate redundancy. There are many people that are hired therein, friends, relatives, in-laws, outlaws of the president. You find them somewhere in the structure there. Doing what? Nothing. And yet they're earning plenty of money. We've got to stop this. We've got to reduce wasteful expenditure on redundant offices that are duplicated, such as RDCs, deputy RDCs, assistant RDCs. We've talked about this. We've got to implement transparent financial management systems for classified expenditure. Yes, it is classified, but one, let it be justifiable. And two, let it make sense. There's got to be a form of accountability in that regard. Foreign affairs. Uganda lacks a coherent foreign policy with outdated mission charters that have been unchanged since 2014. Imagine that. And weak consular services. Thousands of migrant workers, especially in the Middle East, face exploitation, confiscated passports, and unpaid wages, with minimal embassy support. Unstructured labor agreements hinder labor export growth. We implore that this is done. One, that we develop a comprehensive and updated foreign policy framework. And you find our alternative in that big compendium. Do find time and read it, ladies and gentlemen. We've got to expand and modernize consular services to offer better support to Ugandans abroad. We've got to establish enforceable labor agreements to protect migrant workers. These are Ugandans even when they're out of this country. Why should we abandon them? And we've got to rationalize diplomatic missions to optimize costs and impact. Justice and constitutional affairs. I'm just giving a summary of some of the sectors that are in that big compendium. You'll find time and read the others. Uganda's justice system faces a deep crisis marked by weak legal frameworks, systemic human rights violations, limited access to justice, high crime rate, and a collapse of the rule of law. The government has deliberately undermined judicial independence, leading to a constitutional crisis. Corruption remains rampant with no recovery of stolen public funds, while security structures fail to protect citizens. These failures, ladies and gentlemen, threaten social stability and economic progress. This is what we must do. One, strengthen judicial independence by increasing its funding and reducing executive interference. You will hear Mr. Museveni say, you judges will not allow you to take us back to the old days and so on. What happened to independence? Let them operate as should. We've got to expand legal aid programs to ensure access to justice for all citizens, and also enforce anti-corruption measures to hold officials accountable. Then enhance human rights protections through improved monitoring and enforcement mechanisms. Science and technology sector. The science, technology, and innovation sector in Uganda faces significant challenges, including widespread corruption and mismanagement of funds, as evidenced by the lack of transparency in projects like Kira Motors, which was famed as the thing that is going to ameliorate Uganda. There's others like Banana Industrial Research Development Center. Many initiatives, such as Day Biopharma, received billions of shillings before proper agreements were in place, leading to wastage of taxpayer money. This Day Biopharma was given over 723 billion shillings. No agreement. This is a private entity. These are the fellows who promised us a COVID vaccine, you remember? They came huffing and puffing and saying, we have got the cure. COVID came and went. The cure never surfaced. When we visited the entity, they told us the following month, we are going to begin producing medicines. It's now over 6 months, there's nothing happening there. And they're asking for more money. Ridiculous. And all of this is taxpayer money. There's no memorandum of understanding between government and this entity, a private entity. Government said they are buying shares. We asked, what's the worth? We asked the MD of this entity, what's your worth as a company? And he was gambling. The government is saying we are buying stock. What stock are you buying? You know, when we say we have got a ridiculous government, some people think we are saying that for political, I don't know, excitement. But it's good when you look at some of the figures. That's how you know how ridiculous things are. Now, this Kira Motors, they promised to be producing 2,500 buses annually. The last we checked, they were producing 39. We don't even know where those 39 are. And they keep coming with the budget to Parliament. When we say, no, this money here is what we should put in healthcare, our colleagues on the other side, they say, no, you people are against development. We need to establish a national science technology law to regulate intellectual property and innovation commercialization. We've got to implement strong accountability measures for government-funded projects. Let me talk a bit about the public sector. Uganda's public service faces systemic crises, not just a crisis, but crises, plural, including severe brain drain due to uncompetitive salaries, corruption-ridden district service commissions selling jobs to unqualified candidates, and a bloated bureaucracy with 295,000 unfilled positions. The sector suffers from discriminatory remuneration, outdated manual systems, causing pension delays, and a grossly, and this might annoy some of you, a grossly oversized parliament. Colleagues, we are 529 members of parliament for 46 million people. That's not right. I can see some of you looking at me angrily, but it's the reality. It is the reality. Yeah, so a parliament this huge. When we all show up in parliament, we actually don't have where to sit. People stand, others sit on other people's laps, and we are there. They've been promising to build, to complete the new chambers. I think the initial completion date was 2019. We are in 2025. Every morning as I climb to go to my office, I hear people knocking things with hammers, but we don't know what progress is happening there. But they will knock to make you think they're doing some work. That is Rocco, by the way, which was given taxpayer money. And there's nothing happening there. But I'll tell you what I think. Parliament spends billions of shillings to rent offices for all of us as MPs, all staff, Kingdom Kampala, Development House, and so on. Billions of shillings. Could it be that the owners of these facilities are probably, in one way or another, engineering the delay of our chambers? Because for as long as our chambers are complete, Parliament will not be spending billions of shillings to hire offices for MPs and staff. No. But we are in 2025, and there's not much happening there. Your guess is as good as mine, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, in addition to that, we have got dozens upon dozens of presidential advisors, many of whom never meet him at all. You normally see them saying, now that I've got you at this function, let me tell you what I have to tell you. And a few, when he meets them, he's the one advising them. These things have got to change, ladies and gentlemen. We've got nearly 100 ministers. Whenever we need them in parliament to respond to critical issues, they are absent. But they are there. Everybody and their mother has now become a minister. See some ridiculous fellows. And I'm saying ridiculous fellows because of the way they talk and operate. They are there also, honorable minister. This drama has got to change if we want to have a better country. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got to establish a National Salaries Review Commission to ensure fair and competitive pay for public servants. That's something that has got to happen. So that even the salary of members of parliament is determined by this same commission. And everybody else. That's how you grow a country. Today you have science teachers earning 3 or nearly 4 times what their arts colleagues are earning. But they're teaching the same schedules, the same duration, they sit in the same staff room. And you're saying you want to prop up sciences, but as you're doing that, schools don't have laboratories. Some of these children, they encounter burettes, test tubes, Bunsen burners, and all these other reagents for the first time in their final exam. But you say you're promoting sciences. I don't know what's wrong with us. We've got to digitize payroll and pension systems to reduce fraud and delays. And then reduce redundant government agencies to improve efficiency. And strengthen anti-corruption measures in hiring processes. You know that people in this country are hired to very high offices without qualifications. But because they are known by somebody who knows another, they get into those offices. And when that company is making losses year after year, you wonder why. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to realize why. Let me talk a bit about defense. The defense sector in Uganda faces significant challenges, including porous borders that facilitate illegal arms trafficking and terrorist infiltration. Poor accountability in budget allocations with opaque classified expenditures that I talked about, and inadequate welfare for UPDF soldiers, such as low pay, poor housing, and under-equipped medical facilities. These foot soldiers and colleagues, I want to implore you to feel sorry for them and for us to fight to see that they get what they deserve. Police officers, soldiers, prison staff, especially the junior ones, they earn too little. And then they live like refugees in their own country. It's a problem that has got to be fixed. Maybe that's why they behave the way they do behave. Some of them have got mental health issues. The fellow left home, there is no food. The children are sent away for school fees. Maybe that's why they treat us the way they do. See them beating an opposition leader or a journalist for that matter. And you wonder, where is this person's anger emanating from? Now you know. And I'm not justifying anything, by the way, but I'm only trying to be logical as a leader. That you don't expect people who live this way, who are treated this way, they'll find, because they will not go after their bosses. They'll come after the population because they're angry and hungry. We've got to change this as a country. We have got the UPDFs in discipline, rather discipline and professionalism, that are undermined by politicization and lawful civilian trials in military courts. Very problematic issue. Even after the Supreme Court says the court martial should not try civilians. We have several of these, our young people that are still held in jail. The likes of Yasin Machete, Sheriff Kalanzi, Anthony Agaba, also known as Bobby Young, and several others. They're still there. And then we say we have got rule of law. We've got to address these issues, colleagues, for us to have the kind of country that we will cherish. Of course, there's unchecked foreign deployments without parliamentary sanction. They deployed the UPDF in South Sudan and then came to parliament belatedly. And even the speaker, which I found problematic, the speaker said, no, we're not going to debate this issue because it's of huge diplomatic concern. So why are we there as parliament? Why? Because they said, no, this one, pass it immediately and then adjourn the house and run away. Why are we then present? So that shows you that there's something fishy about some of these engagements. Of course, there are other concerns, human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings and suppression of dissent. which further erode public trust. Additionally, this sector, defense, suffers from redundant funding, ghost soldiers on payrolls, and militarization of civilian roles, contradicting constitutional mandates for a non-partisan army. We strongly urge, one, we've got to improve welfare for UPDF personnel, including salaries, housing, and healthcare. We've got to enhance accountability for defense expenditures, particularly classified budgets. Then strengthen border security to prevent illegal arms trafficking, and improve training and equipment for national security forces. Let me talk about agriculture, which is a favorite for Madame Agnes Chirabo. She's very passionate about that, and rightly so. Government has not prioritized public spending on the agricultural sector, despite the AU CAP Malabo 2014 and the recent 2025 Kampala declarations for at least 10% allocation of the national budget to this sector. Budget allocation to the sector has stagnated at less than 3% of the national budget, with a component of more than 50% as external finance. The sectoral growth rate is at 3.8% out of the recommended 6%. About 40% of the agricultural processing factories countrywide are non-functional, but they tell us they are factories. With our tea and coffee factories operating capacity at only about 50%. So instead of bolstering that, they're now putting up new ones which are being given free taxpayers' money. Additionally, farmers are still faced with the challenge of agricultural extension and advisory services. Access to agriculture, credit and finance is problematic, that's at about 12%. The high cost of agricultural inputs and the influx of counterfeits, that's at 30%. The cries in the fisheries subsector. Fishermen are always hounded, beaten, killed because of trying to eke out a living. Limited progress on access to water for agricultural production. Deteriorating prices of agricultural products on the world market, among others. Many Ugandans are malnourished. If you read reports from entities like Food Rights Alliance, many of our young people are malnourished. And yet, Uganda has got nearly half of all the arable land in East Africa. That's land suitable for agriculture. Nearly half of all the arable land in East Africa is here in Uganda. But we have people starving. This is what we must do. One, adhere to the implementation of the National Agricultural Finance Policy to align it with the Malabo 2014 and Kampala CAP 2025 declarations, and commitment to align with NDP4 targets. We've got to revamp the National Seed Company, expedite the National Agricultural Extension Strategy, finalize the National Irrigation Master Plan, and then urgently operationalize the Fisheries and Aquaculture Act of 2022. There's the tourism sector. Tourism has got a lot of potential in this our country, but it is neglected. Limited funding happening there. The infrastructure leading to some of these game parks is in a sorry state. I remember there's a time some tourists got stuck on a road for a day and a half, and the minister, the then Minister of State for Tourism, said that that's part of the tourism experience, for them to see what a third world country is like. So these guys were stuck for nearly 2 days trying to push their car, because they took off time from their country for maybe 4 days to come and spend some dollars here in Uganda. But for 2 days they're stuck on the road. And the one Chiwanda Subi, who was the Minister of State for Tourism, then said that's part of the tourism experience. Those are Museveni's ministers. Let me talk about trade, industry and cooperative sector. Maybe I let you read that in the booklets we have availed to you. There's water and environment sector, which is also very critical. And I encourage us to read, so that I don't take too long here. Look at the proposals that we have therein: strengthening enforcement of environmental protection laws, investing in reforestation and wetland restoration programs, improving access to clean water, particularly in rural areas. Many Ugandans today don't have access to clean water. Enhancing waste management infrastructure to reduce pollution. There's the energy sector. And we are saying we've got to expand rural electrification through off-grid solar and mini-grid solutions. Only about 30% of our country is connected to the national grid. 70% are in darkness. I know it's difficult for you here in Kampala to believe that 70% of our country is not connected to the national grid. These are things that we need to deal with. There's the water and transport sector. And I'll urge us to read that component too. Lands, housing, and urban sector. Critical concerns there. Our shadow minister is always talking about them. Gender, labor, and social development. Let me talk about internal affairs. The internal affairs sector in Uganda faces key challenges, including underfunding for security and law enforcement, inadequate police infrastructure, corruption, and human rights concerns. Other issues include slow service delivery in immigration and national identification processes, risking cybercrime, and congestion in correctional facilities due to case backlog and limited rehabilitation programs. We've got to do this. One, increase funding for recruitment, training and equipping the police force to improve security and public trust. Many of you know that when you have a challenge and you call on police to come to your aid, they will struggle to come because you find there's one car for I don't know how many sub-counties. Then many times they don't have fuel, genuinely so. During the killings in Masaka, a committee of parliament went and interacted with, I think it was one of the OC station, one of those regional fellows. And this guy was honest with them and said, look, I've got one car for most of this place, and many times it does not have fuel. So people call us saying, machete wielding men are here, and we cannot move. And I remember a minister coming out to the Minister for Security, Honorable Jim Owezi. He came out to castigate this police officer, in fact wanted to sanction him. It was until the public said, but the man is speaking the truth. There's just one truck in that whole region area, that specific one where the committee was. Many times it doesn't have fuel. And he said, now, with my little salary, should I be the one fueling this car when people call? And he said, genuinely, people call for help. I want to help, but how do I help? And what he was saying is making government look bad, as opposed to availing what is required. We've got to strengthen cybersecurity measures and digital forensic capabilities to combat online crime, which is increasing by the day. We've got to expand fire stations across the country to ensure a timely response to fire outbreaks, improve efficiency in passport issuance, border security, and national ID registration. Enhance rehabilitation programs in prisons to reduce recidivism and promote reintegration into society. Strengthen anti-corruption mechanisms within law enforcement agencies to eliminate bribery and misconduct. Promote community policing initiatives to foster better relations between law enforcement and citizens. Some of the community policing that happens today, you see one general dam leader going to talk bad about the opposition and recruit people into NRM. That's not what policing, community policing should be. But the likes of General Damulida have interpreted it that way. You'll go to the ghettos and say, these Chagulajis, they are bad people, you come, we join this party and work together. So to him, that's the brilliant idea of community policing. We've got to strengthen enforcement of disciplinary action against errant officers who violate the law in the conduct of their duties, especially those who brutalize the citizenry. Let me conclude this way. Our alternative budget priorities focus on investing in key sectors such as healthcare, education, agriculture, and infrastructure to drive inclusive development. Adequate funding for public hospitals, support for small-scale farmers, improvements in education, and investment in sustainable infrastructure are essential for building an economy that benefits all Ugandans. We advocate for a budget that centers on the people's needs, fostering a more just and prosperous Uganda. This kind of budget is achievable once you put people first and combat corruption, which is eating up the resources meant to deliver services to the citizenry. For as long as we keep losing over 10 trillion shillings a year, as per the IGG report, there is just no way, ladies and gentlemen, that we shall have resources to invest in these priority sectors. Those who steal taxpayers' money are promoted and pampered, as opposed to being locked up in jail and forced to return the stolen loot. We have all watched the debate regarding the Umeme concession that comes to an end today. Government entered into a bad deal with this company, like they normally do with many of these agreements they sign. Years ago, this deal was detrimental to the country, as they normally do with many other deals and agreements. Today, Umeme says government owes them $234 million US. Government told Parliament that it owes $190 million US. While the Auditor General says the figure is only $118 million. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what theft looks like. This, exactly. Then you have a figure, $234 million. Government is saying $190 million. Auditor General, who is part of government, is saying no, it is $118 million US. Somebody wants to rip off the taxpayer along the way. There's no way this country can develop with such confusion. Because even the Auditor General's figure of $118 million US, some of us are saying we want to scrutinize that. And that's what we told the presiding officer on that day. We said, you have told us you've received a report from the Auditor General saying the figure is $118 million US. And you're asking us to pass it as Parliament. What are we passing? I am very sure even the presiding officer had not read that report. I am sure. They didn't know what the contents of that report were. But then you're saying, quickly, let's pass it so that we deal with this issue. Yes, we don't want the country to lose money, but what exactly are we passing? We protested, but our colleagues on the other side say, they might have it. But are we sure of what the exact money is? Because even the Auditor General's reports, normally they're brought to Parliament, we scrutinize them. Because there can be gaps therein. Because now who should we believe? Somebody somewhere is not telling the true story regarding Umeme. And I can assure you we are going to dig up until we get to the bottom of the truth. So that taxpayers' money is not taken for a ride. I'd like to implore us all as a country to say no to these machinations and get our country in order. As the opposition, let's continue to keep the government in check, even as we work hard to send it off so that Ugandans can have a government that is accountable to them and prioritizes their well-being. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. As I leave the stage, I just want to appreciate colleagues with whom we do this work. I know Honorable Helen talked about the shadow cabinet. I want to very much appreciate members of the shadow cabinet. Thank you. I normally harass you, and I'm using the word harass in bold and underline so that we get to do our work. So that we have these alternatives in place. So I'm normally gathering you, please, how far with this, with the technical team and so on. So I want to appreciate all of you for all the work that you do put in. And the technical staff, those ones I harass a lot more. For you, your colleagues, sometimes I have to restrain myself. But I want to appreciate the technical team led by the director for all the hard work. We are going to work even harder. We have a small team, as you know. People's contracts ended. Parliament said there is no money to renew contracts of staff from the office of the leader of the opposition. I said, wow, but you're recruiting new people every day. Where did that money come from that cannot take care of these ones? That's the ridiculousness of politics. So with a very small team, we work day and night to see to it that we produce this work, because it is important that Ugandans see this here is a credible government in waiting. So I want to appreciate you all. Our Shadow Finance Minister should have been here. He's out of town on some engagements, but I do appreciate him and the rest of us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me now invite an OB of this place. He was here quite briefly, but he was around, and his presence was felt. The leader of the National Unity Platform, the Honorable Kyagulanyi Ssentamu Robert, please come and speak to us.
Thank you very much. Our able leader of Parliamentary Front, my leader of opposition when I was here, Right Honorable Winnie Kiza, distinguished guests, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. I want to salute our parliamentary team for work very well done. I was listening both with gladness but also with anger as the leader of opposition was speaking to us. I've had the opportunity to quickly go through the write-ups of the alternative budget, and I was in real sense comparing the ideal and the real. That is definitely ideal. And if we do things that way, we can be able to revolutionize every sector in our country. But unfortunately, we have the real to grapple with. We have the reality to deal with here. Nothing encourages like the theme of today, combating corruption, a sure way of effective service delivery. Yes, combating that corruption. And I'll quote one eminent leader that we have in this country, Mzee Mayengo Israel, who was speaking a few weeks ago. He said, and I agree with him, that back in the day, President Obote noted that the problem of Uganda and Africa generally is reduced into three things. That is poverty, that is ignorance, and disease. And he was spot on. Today, Mzee Mayengo reduced the problem in Uganda. It is no longer poverty, ignorance, and disease, but it is centrally corruption, because corruption is the center of all this. I want to salute our parliamentary front for the continued fight. And ladies and gentlemen, indeed there's no better place to talk about corruption than here, the Parliament of Uganda, which has distinguished itself in recent days as the high temple of corruption. I hate to use those words, but if we are to deal with the problem, then understanding it and addressing it in reality is the first step. This parliament has had the most outrageous scandals recently. In recent times, we've seen the Speaker of Parliament with impunity siphoning taxpayers' money. In recent days, we have seen this parliament doing unprecedented things. We've seen in this parliament the Speaker of Parliament and government ministers sharing iron sheets meant for the poorest of the poor in Uganda. It is in this parliament that we've seen the leader of opposition rewarded before he works. It was in this parliament where we saw that so-called service award. And it is this parliament that provoked the conscience of even our young people. We all remember the young people of this nation getting up and deciding to have a march to parliament. Many of them were arrested, as you read in the newspapers, tortured, and even sodomized for daring to counter corruption. For those young people that were trying to make their way to parliament and failed, I thought that maybe today I could try to be their spokesperson, to be their mouthpiece, and say to you what those young people were not able to say. Friends, corruption, I think, has become cliche. It has become, corruption is too cool a name to give to what is being done. A while ago, the head of Transparency International defined corruption, and I agree with him, as the cold and calculated robbery of a people's future, of people's opportunities. And I agree, because it is corruption that has stolen the future of the people of Uganda. Many of you who are under 50 have seen that corruption has robbed all your youthful and useful days from you. Corruption has stolen the vision of Uganda from the people of Uganda. I could go on and on and on about corruption, since we Ugandans all know that our country ranks number 140 out of 180 countries, the most corrupt. That means we're only 40 countries shy from the corruption trophy. A situation where we lose almost half of the revenue collected in Uganda. That corruption should be, looked at as a corruption in crisis level. We are in trouble because of corruption. The Inspector General of Government, the current one, Betty Kanya, who we expect to most understand corruption, defined it, simplified it a few weeks ago in an online video, and I agree with her. She once again told us that to lose to the tune of 10 trillion, I believe it could be more, to corruption. But again, she goes further to break it down to us and tell us that out of the 45.9 million Ugandans, it is only 350,000 Ugandans that are in that circle. Now, these are not the people controlling the country or our economy. These are just a group of people that I would call enablers, including some of you members of parliament, including all the people that are being used. But again, she goes further to show us that a small group of people that are even 10% or less of the enablers, that is roughly 35,000 people. This is a small group of people that is milking the entire country, and we all know these are the people that have decided that our country is supposed to go down the drain. Let us imagine what 10 trillion can do. A little while ago, we were imagining what that money can do if corruption was stamped out. 10 trillion lost every year. Imagine what that money can do to our roads.